What's going on, guys? Welcome to We Got a Problem. So the Tory leadership candidate Rory Stewart appeared on Nigel Farage's LBC radio show. The Brexit Party leader was quizzing Rory on his policies, like wanting to push through Theresa May's failed deal, the People's Assembly, and WTO Brexit. Now let's watch the first clip and we'll go through it.
Rory, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Can you see me?
I can, and I want to congratulate you. You are the only one of the candidates who's shown any spark of imagination, you've tenacity, you've been out round the country, you've done things differently. I've complimented you in a piece I've written in the Sunday Express this morning. And forgetting policy, well done you for brightening up the campaign. And have you been enjoying it?
I've been loving it, Nigel. And I think I suspect when I see you campaign, you enjoy it too. Because actually, what we love about politics is talking to people and listening to people.
Absolutely. I love it too. I love going out and about. I'm not very thrilled, of course, if people chuck milkshakes over me. But yes, I do like going out and talking to people. Now, I just want to get this clear. You know, I understand many of the things you're talking about, making us a fairer society, etc. And we've had in the last hour callers and texters and tweeters saying that they think you'd be a very good candidate to take on Jeremy Corbyn in a general election. But we've got to solve a problem called Brexit. And I'm a little bit confused because you're saying no second referendum, you're saying no to a WTO Brexit, and you're talking about these people's assemblies. How are they going to solve this?
Well, the starting point has to be that we live in a parliamentary democracy. So the only constitutional legal way of getting Brexit done is through Parliament. So I would start with Parliament. And I would say to Parliament, I'd hope, if I was lucky enough to be elected as the leader of the Conservative Party, that I'm coming in with a fresh mandate, that the European elections, and in fact, your own party, the Brexit Party's phenomenal performance at the European elections, should have put an electric shock up MPs from all parties about how important it is to get Brexit done. And by far the quickest way to get it done is for Parliament to vote through a deal immediately in July so we can be well out before October. But if we fail to do that, then I think we need to have what they did in Ireland, which is to have a citizens' assembly where we can sit normal people, like a jury. It's a great tradition of English law. Get people from all parts of the country together, get them to sit down for 3 weeks, look at the details, and then produce the recommendations to Parliament. Because Parliament is gridlocked, it's stuck, people are hugely frustrated, and we need some way of unlocking Parliament and taking the party politics out of this to get Brexit done.
So if you got these people's assemblies up and running, and let's say that they genuinely were a cross-section of the country, not just a metropolitan elite appearing on these panels, what if, after a debate, they conclude that we should leave on the 31st of October on a WTO deal, but Parliament doesn't respect that position? What then?
Well, first thing is that whatever this Citizens' Assembly concluded would have a huge impact. Constitutionally, of course, Parliament makes the final decision, but remember, a representative group of people drawn from all across the United Kingdom, North and South, Scotland, England, young and old, that made that recommendation would have made it after 3 weeks of sitting in public, with the television cameras there watching them take the evidence. Parliament would have to take very seriously whatever recommendation they came forward with. But ultimately, Parliament is sovereign, and if they came up with a recommendation that Parliament wouldn't accept, Parliament, of course, has the legal right to say no.
Now, Nigel said that a lot of callers think Rory would be able to beat Jeremy Corbyn in a general election. Personally, I think everyone except Theresa May would be able to beat Jeremy Corbyn in a general election thanks to the current crisis within the Labour Party caused by the infighting between Commissar Corbynov and his fellow commies. Corbyn is unelectable at the moment, in my opinion. Nigel then moves on to Rory the Soy Boy Stewart's opposition to a no-deal Brexit and a second referendum, while calling for a People's Assembly, which sounds to me less democratic than a second referendum, so should be removed completely from the discussion. It's just another way for a small group of people to decide the future of Brexit when they've still not honoured the first public vote that said we need to leave 3 years ago. Now, Rory's response to Nigel's question is both pathetic and contradictory in my opinion. He starts off his response wanting to get Theresa May's deal through, but if that fails, he will move on to the People's Assemblies. I can't believe he is actually standing for leader with a policy to use Theresa May's deal to get it through Parliament on its fourth attempt. After all, this deal has failed miserably 3 times previously. Even the corrupt Parliament knows this deal would make us the vassal state of Europe, since it's not actually a deal, it's a surrender document, as I've said multiple times. In my opinion, he is just trying to appeal to Remainers with the option of a People's Assembly, which is just a second referendum on a smaller scale without calling it that, to give hope to the rescinding Article 50. That's what it seems like to me anyway. Now let's check out the next clip.
But you say the Parliament is sovereign. Aren't the people sovereign? Isn't our democracy based on the fact that we, the people, make decisions, we, the people, elect MPs, we lend them authority for a 4 or 5 year period, we then judge them at the next election? And isn't there something really wrong with a national referendum being held in 2016 with the Prime Minister, with the official document that went to everybody's house? Everybody was told, this is your decision, and what you decide will be final. And now, Rory Stewart, you're telling us 3 years later that wasn't really true.
You are completely right, Nigel. I agree with every single thing you've said there. That referendum result should be respected. I promised every member of Parliament that I know of, and every political party was asked repeatedly during that campaign whether they would respect the result of that referendum, however it went. I promised to do it. Everybody else promised to do it. They put it in their manifestos. We must respect the result of that referendum. I am furious that we haven't left the European Union so far, and I think it has really let people down. But there is a tension here, and that's the tension which you can see at the heart of our Constitution, which we have a direct democracy with the people telling us to do something, and then we have a parliament, an indirect democracy, which has somehow failed to get that through. And that's what I'm trying to unlock. That's what we've got to unlock to do this legally.
If we can't unlock this, and if there is no give from... And it's tough to know, of course, who we're going to negotiate with in Brussels, because they're going to be busy getting ready for the next European Commission, the whole series of hearings that will take place through the autumn, etc. But if there's no give in Brussels, if there's no way Parliament can agree to a withdrawal treaty, is then not the only logical thing to do to leave on WTO terms, to respect the result of the referendum?
Okay, let's do these two things. So the first thing is, I agree with you 100% that you're not going to get a different deal out of Brussels. So all these candidates that are pretending that somehow between now and the end of October they're going to get a completely brand new deal.
It's for the birds. Yeah.
Totally for the birds. And you know that much better than I do, because you've spent an enormous amount of time in Europe and in the Parliament, and you understand they're all in recess and we're never going to get a different deal through. So any candidate saying that they're going to get a different deal through Brussels is just signing up for wasting our time and more delay, because they're never going to get it and we'll still be stuck in the European Union in months to come. So then you come to your second point. If you can't get the deal through, should we not just go on WTO rules at the end of October? And that's, I think, where we have a disagreement. Firstly, I do not believe that that would get through Parliament. And I think the suggestions that Don Raab and apparently Boris are making, that the way that you get it through Parliament is to suspend Parliament, lock the doors on Parliament, isn't something that I want to see in this country. We're going to have to bring people with us. So we have to find a route of getting this done, painful though it sounds, which works through Parliament, which is why I want to make an offer to you, which is that you represent such an important part of this debate. Your results in these elections, the fact that you actually led us out of Europe in the first place, puts you in a very, very important position in this. We need to find a way as a party of reaching out to you, not only to you, I also actually want to reach out to trade unions and other people in this country who care about our economy and about the car industry, but we must reach out to you and bring you in to try to work out how we crack this. How do we get this through Parliament? What is it we need to do to get it through Parliament? Because the thing that's frustrating me with Boris is that he just keeps asserting again and again that he's going to leave on the 31st of October, and he never tells us how he's going to do it.
Nigel points out how the people lend these MPs power, which Rory agrees with. Then how can he be against closing Parliament if the voters have demanded that Brexit be done? Rory and his other MPs should be there saying, if the EU won't give us what we want, then we are out. Everything we ask for is our own, so they have no right to make us need a deal to leave. We should just be able to leave. Now, Nigel and Rory both agree that talk of a new deal from Europe is full of birds, something I actually agree with. There is no hope of getting another deal. Theresa May destroyed any chance of that. The only way to leave in October is to go for no deal. There is no other option now. The other candidates like Dominic Raab want to shut Parliament to get no deal. Which is a patriotic thing to do. As Nigel said, they need to respect the democratic vote, not Parliament. The old soy boy Rory is not happy about that though, even though he did admit earlier Parliament is not doing what the people have instructed, showing his hypocrisy. So if Parliament are not working for us, why can't we shut it down? He sits there claiming he is furious we have not left the EU, when it's fuckpig soy boys like him that have got us into this complete shit state of affairs anyway. If the corrupt Ramon in Parliament needs to be shut down to ensure the democratic vote is seen through, then so be it. Now, we're going to move on to some questions put to Rory by the viewers of the show. Let's take a quick look.
OK, fine. Let's go to James in Bayswater. James, please put your question to Rory Stewart.
Hello, Nigel. Hello, Rory.
Good
I
on.
went to Rory's rally at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park to find out a bit more about him. I heard so much about him on the media, and he's been given so much coverage. He gave the impression of being on the very left of the Conservative Party, and the crowd there, mostly his supporters, were mostly kind of Lib Dem and Green Party mould, from what I could make out. And he very much talks the language of social justice and grievance mongering. And I'm just wondering, why isn't Rory in the Lib Dems?
Are you a lefty, Rory?
No, I'm not a lefty. I'm a proud conservative. I believe deeply in limited government, individual rights, prudence at home, sense abroad. And I also am an economic conservative. I'm the only person in this race who's not making unfunded tax and spending pledges. But there is an important point here. I shouldn't be ashamed of the fact that a lot of Labour voters and Lib Dem voters want to vote for me. That's how we're going to win an election. Of course we need to get people back right across the spectrum. If we can deliver Brexit in a way that makes sense for the people that vote for Nigel, they will then vote for us again. If, it's a big if. We've got to do that, otherwise we're not going to win an election. We've got to deliver Brexit. But we've also, if we're going to win an election, got to get people who are currently voting Lib Dem and Labour. I'll tell you something. They are fed up with Jeremy Corbyn. They are looking for a vision of this country that is sensible and moderate and actually, I believe, conservative.
James, does that make sense to you or not?
Not really. I mean, Rory says that he's the only candidate who doesn't make unfunded spending pledges, but he's pledged to build 2 million homes for 100 billion in 5 years. And as someone who has a pretty good experience of the cost of large residential housing projects, that seems pure fantasy of a champagne socialist to me.
Okay, back
Rory?
to you on that. My rule is that I would only borrow against houses, and it would be borrowing, because they are marketable assets. In other words, the government gets something for its money. It gets bricks and mortar, which it can rent out or sell. We have a huge housing shortage in this country. People cannot afford to get homes. And the government can play a really useful role in that. It's a good time for the government to borrow for 40 years, but it only makes sense to borrow against a real asset, a real thing. That's where I disapprove of the Labour Party. They've done far too much borrowing against what's effectively the current account, and the government's left with nothing at the end of it.
OK, thank you.
So the first question is by James from Bayswater. He calls out what I have long suspected, that Rory is a socialist conservative. He claims he can't be a leftist because he is a conservative. I would say that's nonsense. The Conservative Party is left-wing now. The Labour Party are just a far-left party now, in my opinion. Conservative voters have the same conservative opinions, but the political party has been infected with political correctness, feminist sympathisers and Lib Dem types, cut from the same cloth that drives the Lib Dem and Labour Party ideologies, further reinforced by blue checkmark socialists on Twitter and their outrage mobs, forcing people to maintain the politically correct line. The average Conservative voter is still centre-right, but the politicians are going further and further to the left as time progresses. Just because you don't want to waste loads of money like Labour does not mean you're not a lefty, Rory. The supporters at your rally appeared to be the Lib Dem and Green Party types, Rory. The caller even calls out this shitweasel for his social justice and grievance mongering rhetoric during his rally, and questions why he isn't in the Lib Dems. Rory admits his social justice views attract the Labour and Lib Dem socialists, proving he is a lefty. Pandering to social justice types won't convince the Brexit Party supporters to come back to the Tories. No one likes the identity politics and outrage culture the left has weaponised against anyone who disagrees with them. Now, I'm not a Tory voter and never have been, but I'm sure Conservative voters won't want the socialist types like Rory invading their party.
I'm going to go to Peter in Maida Vale, who wants to ask you a question. Good morning, Peter.
Oh, good morning again, Nigel. And hello, Rory. How are you?
Hello, very well, thank you.
I do like the cut of your cloth, Rory, but there's a few things I've got to argue against here. The idea of people's assemblies really worries me. They're like little focus groups, really. We already have people's assemblies. They're called polls. You get the answer you want generally depending on the way you actually ask the question. I've done jury duty, and I was in fact, chairman of one of the juries, and people can be swayed, and of course this is the problem with social media. It's a double-edged sword, and you have to be very, very careful with this. And I think that maybe the Swiss have got the answer with their model for mini referenda. I know it's the same thing, but it's more representative. How do you feel about that as a future possibility?
Well, it's a good challenge. I think where we agree is that Parliament is stuck, it's gridlocked, it's checkmated. We've got to find a way of unlocking Parliament, taking the party politics out of this. I mean, one of the things that shocked me most in this is that the majority of Labour MPs come from constituencies that voted Leave. And there are at least 80 Labour MPs who've said they'd never had a second referendum, they want to get Brexit through, who are refusing to vote for any kind of Brexit deal. I mean, there was a moment where it sounded as though Jeremy Corbyn was saying, if we change the deal to something else, he'd vote for it. It's now clear that they're not prepared to vote for any kind of Brexit deal. And why is that? I think it's because Parliament's got stuck in party political trenches. So we need to find some way of unlocking this. I hope that I can unlock it by coming in with a fresh mandate, just looking them in the eye and saying, let's get this done, and using the Brexit Party's success to put an electric shock into Parliament and get it through. If that doesn't happen, though, we're going to have to find some way of getting a fresh mandate. And I think the best way of getting a fresh mandate quickly and efficiently is to get a group that's scientifically selected to be fair and representative of the country and let them come back and say, this is what we, the Citizens' Assembly, recommend. Because Parliament isn't doing it, because the difference is we need... let me just finish on this. I think the way I'd think about it is we need a bridge between the direct democracy of the referendum and the indirect democracy of Parliament. We need some way of connecting people back to it, putting back the basic message, which is people voted for Brexit, and the question is just now, how do we get it done?
Now that question we heard from Peter in Madeira Vale. He shares the same issues with the people's assemblies that I do. They are not representative of the population, and people can be swayed. Look at the Project Fear's constant attempts to make people think a no-deal Brexit will be the end of this country. We already had a people's vote in 2016 and they voted to leave. Only a Ramona would suggest such a stupid idea, no matter how much Rory sits there claiming he wants Brexit. He blames Labour for blocking Brexit deals, but in truth both parties have blocked Brexit, including him. He thinks a scientifically selected assembly would give him a mandate to force Theresa May's deal through Parliament. No shitweasel, it does not. The mandate is already there. It's to leave regardless of deals. He talks about a bridge between Parliament and the Brexit voters. That's easy. Do what the voters asked for and the bridges won't be burned like they are now because the government has let people down.
Let's go to Stuart in Wakefield. Good morning, Stuart.
Hello, Nigel. Rory.
Hello there.
Is you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Right, first of all, you've just said that you wouldn't agree with Boris Johnson if he won. So first of all, your party is in pieces and arguing. The Labour Party's in pieces. The last 3 years we've had this, what you just called sovereign. You're the sovereign parliament of this country. Well, the last 3 years, all this sovereign parliament has done has proved that you're a set of clowns shouting and putting country down instead of putting the country first. You know, and you can sit there talking slow and posh, but there's only one person that'd fight for our country and get what we really need with the Brexit deal, which was voted for, and he sat aside here. And that's it, Rory, because none of you can be trusted. And the Labour Party, well, they've lost all their support. They've lost it. You've just let the people down, not just yourself, but about 550 others of them in Parliament. You've let everybody down, and you can't be trusted anymore.
Rory, there's a lot of people out there do feel that. Please, what would you say to Stuart?
Well, Stuart, I am picking up again and again, not just from you, but from the people I've been meeting in Peterborough, or Derby, and Warrington, and Wigan, and actually people I've met in Londonderry and Enniskillen and Edinburgh, that people are furious, and they're right to be furious, because a referendum was held, people voted for Brexit. I, and almost every member of Parliament, promised to respect that result. And so I have been voting again and again and arguing again and again to try to get this Brexit deal done. Now, I agree, it's not the version of Brexit that Nigel Farage wants. It's not necessarily the version of Brexit you wanted, but I've been trying to get it done in as practical way as I can. And in the end, we keep coming back to the fundamental issue, which is you have to take it through Parliament. And unless somebody can win a majority in Parliament to drive this through, we're going to have to negotiate and compromise. But let me say this too. If we can get a deal done, leave the European Union, leave the Parliament, leave the Commission, leave any talk about a European army, take back control of our borders, take back control of immigration, I think we will get a burst of investment into this country. I think the economy will take off, and then a lot of the debates we're having at the moment about things like tariff schedules will seem in 2 years' time small issues compared to the big game, which is sovereignty and politics.
But arguably, and one of the reasons, and I'm sure Stewart feels as I do, that the problem is that what Mrs May negotiated actually in many ways was worse than the current set of European treaties. How are you going to get something different from Brussels? It's impossible, isn't it?
I don't think you can get something different from Brussels. I think that many of the people in my constituency, and many of the people, in fact, who vote for you, have one priority, which is to get on with it and get it done. They're absolutely fed up with sitting in a sort of limbo purgatory where we could be stuck in the European Union still discussing this for months to come. So I would say it may not be the perfect deal, but for goodness sake, let's get it done. And what's worrying me here at the moment is that if people keep pushing for a perfect vision of the deal, which can't get through Parliament, we're going to be still stuck in the European Union in 3 years' time, and we're all going nuts. Let's get out of the European Union, let's get back our sovereignty, let's get back control of our borders, let's leave the Parliament, let's leave the Commission, and then move on.
We all agree with that. I mean, look, those of us on the Leave side agree with the words that you've just spoken. Of course we do. But Jenny tweets to me here, and she says, Rory doesn't realise May's withdrawal agreement is the issue. The withdrawal agreement is really bad, and we don't want it.
Jenny, some people feel that. Some people don't care about the details of it. They just want to leave the European Union. In fact, I think the majority in the polls, it seems to me, of people voting for the Brexit Party, their main thing is they feel angry that they were let down, they voted for something in a referendum, and it hasn't happened. Their real priority is to get it done. That deal is a 500 and whatever page deal. It's an incredibly complicated document. There are very good things in it. It does give us back control over immigration. It would mean that in 5-10 years' time you aren't paying billions of pounds to Europe. It would give you frictionless access to European markets. But we've been round and round this for 2.5 years, and Nigel and I disagree on this, and you and I disagree on this. But my message to you is, let's, for goodness sake, get Brexit done and move on.
Well, I think the trouble is, Rory, that if this was to go through, it wouldn't be the end of the issue, because we could potentially, through the backstop, be trapped inside the customs union, and you and I couldn't debate agricultural tariffs.
So Stewart in Wakefield calling the idiots in Parliament's clowns is spot on. Telling Rory that Nigel is the only person who is fighting for the good of this country, however, is not true. Many others are fighting for the good of the country. Most just don't have the media attention that Nigel has. So I'm sure Nigel would agree that he is the face of Brexit, but many others are putting in work to get it done, even if we don't see it. Now, I love how Rory's comments on how furious people are that we still have not left the EU, while still trying to push for signing a surrender document that makes us a vassal state of Europe that everybody has already rejected. Luckily, Nigel Farage points this out to him. The shitweasel really does not get it, though. People do not want to continue paying billions to Europe for years to come. He even admits that for the next 5 or 10 years, under the terms of that deal, we will be paying billions to Europe. Why would ministers of this country even consider an idea that says we should pay the EU billions of pounds after we've left? Let alone for 10 years. It should have been rejected outright and binned.
Rory, I've got a Twitter question for you here. What compromise do you think Parliament would have made if the result had been 52% Remain? I can answer that. Nothing. Zip, says Steve. Is Steve right? If Remain had won by 52%, would there even be a debate?
I think it's a really good challenge. Really, really good challenge. I think, Steve, you're probably right. I don't think that there would have been any compromise at all. But the fact is, our country is now, whether we like it or not, very, very divided over this issue. The majority of people voted Brexit, but a lot of people voted Remain. We're going to have to get through Brexit, get Brexit done, then we're going to have to bring the country back together again, because I don't want to live in a country that's going to spend the next 40 years debating this issue. So we've got to do it in a way that works for democracy, respects the referendum, but also reaches out to young people, reaches out to Scotland, reaches out to London, as well as all the areas that I've been, from Wigan to Derby to Enniskillen. We've got to make it work for the whole country. And this matters to me personally. I'm a Scot who represents an English constituency on the English-Scottish border. And I really want to keep the United Kingdom together, so I also want to deliver this in a way that really works for the whole United Kingdom. This is a great country, and a lot of the energy of this country comes from these 4 nations together. So let's get Brexit done, but then let's reunify.
The awesome foursome, as Boris called them the other day.
Well, there's not much I can say about that. Both Nigel and Rory are right. If it was the other way around, then there would be no debate going on. Brexiteers would have just had to suck it up, unlike the shitweasel Remainers who are trying to ignore democracy. That's going to be the end of the video, guys. Let me know what you think about the Ramoning soy boy Rory Stewart's plans to use the May deal to get Brexit done. Now don't forget to like and share the video, as it helps the channel a lot. and I will see you all in the next video.